The night shift at St. Helena General Hospital was quiet in that eerie way hospitals often are. The hum of machines, the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes, the distant ring of a call bell echoing down long, sterile hallways. Dr. Ethan Miles moved briskly through the corridor, clipboard in hand, his white coat perfectly pressed, his stethoscope shining under the fluorescent lights. He was known for being sharp, fast, and brilliant, and for thinking he didn't have time for anyone who wasn't on his level. As he approached the nurses' station, he nearly bumped into Samuel Turner, the hospital's night janitor. Samuel was in his late 50s, broad-shouldered but gentle-faced, wearing faded blue scrubs and pushing his mop bucket down the hall. He smiled when he saw Ethan. "Evening, Doc. Long night, huh?" Ethan didn't even glance up from his chart. "Yeah, as usual," he muttered, stepping around him. "Try not to block the hall, all right? There's a patient coming through in a few minutes." Samuel's smile faltered slightly, but he nodded. "Of course, doctor. I'll be out of your way." As Ethan hurried off, Samuel watched him disappear into the ICU. He'd worked at the hospital for almost 20 years. He'd seen doctors come and go, interns grow into surgeons, and patients take their first and last breaths. He knew every floorboard creak, every nurse's rhythm, every sound a heart monitor could make. But to most people, especially doctors like Ethan, he was invisible, just the man with a mop. A few hours later, a young patient was rushed into the ER, a boy no older than 10, pale and sweating, his breathing shallow. Ethan took charge instantly. "Get me vitals. What's his oxygen level?" 92 and dropping, the nurse said quickly. Ethan frowned. "Possible asthma attack. Prep for nebulizer treatment." They moved fast. IV, oxygen mask, meds. But the boy's breathing didn't improve. His pulse started to spike. Ethan muttered to himself, scanning the monitor. "It's not responding. Could be an allergic reaction, or maybe an infection. Damn it, what am I missing?" He ran through his mental checklist, oblivious to the quiet footsteps that stopped just outside the room. Samuel had paused his cleaning cart, glancing through the glass, his brow furrowed. He'd seen that look before, the panic of a doctor losing control of a situation. Ethan ordered another round of medication, frustration growing. "Why isn't this working?" Then, from behind him, a calm voice said, "Doc, sorry to interrupt, but you checked the oxygen tank?" Ethan spun around, irritated. "Excuse me? This is a restricted area." Samuel stepped back slightly but didn't flinch. "I just noticed something, sir. That tank's one of the older ones. I changed the others this morning. That one might not be full." Ethan frowned, ready to dismiss him, but something about Samuel's tone gave him pause. He turned, grabbed the gauge, and froze. The tank was almost empty. He cursed under his breath. "Get a new one now!" The nurse rushed to swap it out. Within seconds of the fresh tank being connected, the boy's oxygen levels began to rise. 92, 95, 98. His chest eased, his breathing stabilized. The room exhaled in collective relief. Ethan stood still, the adrenaline fading as realization sank in. He turned back toward the hallway, but Samuel was already gone, quietly pushing his cart down the corridor, back to his work as if nothing had happened. For a long moment, Ethan just stood there, watching. The boy was safe, because the janitor had spoken up when no one else did. And for the first time, Dr. Ethan Miles wondered if maybe the smartest man in the hospital wasn't wearing a white coat after all. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows of St. Helena General, painting the corridors in pale gold. Nurses hurried from room to room, doctors scribbled charts, and the hum of the hospital day shift filled the air. But Dr. Ethan Miles wasn't his usual self. He stood at the nurses' station, staring absently at a report, the events of the night before replaying in his mind like a broken reel. The boy's pulse stabilizing, the oxygen tank nearly empty, and Samuel Turner's calm, steady voice. "You checked the oxygen tank?" Ethan had gone home at dawn, but he hadn't slept a minute. The thought that he, the hospital's most precise, methodical physician, could have lost a child because he didn't notice something so simple gnawed at him. And worse yet, the man who saved that child wasn't a doctor. He wasn't even a nurse. He was the janitor everyone ignored. "Hey, have you seen the night custodian?" Ethan asked one of the morning nurses as she typed into her computer. She looked up, puzzled. You mean Sam? Why? I just need to speak with him. It's important. She smiled faintly. You'll have better luck after lunch. He usually finishes cleaning the East Wing around that time. He doesn't talk much, though. Quiet guy. Been here forever. Yeah, Ethan murmured. I know. Around noon, Ethan walked down the East Wing, scanning the hall for the familiar blue uniform. The floors gleamed, cleaner than usual, he noticed, and the faint scent of disinfectant hung in the air. Finally, he spotted Samuel, pushing his mop bucket near the windowed waiting area. Mr. Turner, Ethan called. Samuel turned, surprised. Dr. Miles, didn't expect to see you down here. Everything all right? Ethan approached, holding his hands behind his back. Actually, I wanted to thank you for last night. You saved that boy's life. Samuel shook his head. No, sir. You did the hard part. I just saw something you didn't. Ethan frowned. That's exactly the point. You saw what I didn't. You caught what none of us in the room did. How? Samuel hesitated, glancing around before answering. Been working here 20 years, Doc? You pick up a lot more than dirt in that time. You learn which machines hum right, which ones don't. You learn people, too. Which doctors panic, which ones listen. Ethan's lips parted slightly, taken aback by the quiet wisdom in the man's words. You've been here 20 years? And no one's ever... He stopped himself. You should have been recognized long ago. Samuel smiled. Recognition doesn't clean floors, sir. I just do my part. But your part saved a child, Ethan insisted. That deserves more than a passing thank you. Samuel met his eyes. Calm, steady, kind. Doctor, I appreciate that, but you don't do this job for credit. You do it because if you stop caring about people, even in the small ways, this place stops being a hospital and starts being just another building. Ethan didn't know what to say. For once, words failed him. He'd spent his entire career chasing precision, reputation, and status. But here stood a man with none of those. And yet somehow, he had everything that truly mattered. As Ethan turned to leave, he stopped and glanced back. Samuel, why didn't you speak up sooner? I mean, you must have seen things before. Times when someone made a mistake. Samuel's eyes softened. Most of the time, people don't want to hear it, especially when it comes from someone like me. That hit Ethan like a punch to the chest. He thought of all the times he'd walked past Samuel without so much as a nod. All the times he'd heard him say, "Good evening, doctor," and answered with silence. He swallowed hard. Well, he said quietly, from now on, if you see something, anything, you tell me. No hesitation. Samuel smiled faintly. You sure about that, Doc? I've got opinions on everything, even the coffee around here. Ethan laughed for the first time in days. Then I'll start listening. Later that afternoon, as he passed through the ER, Ethan overheard two interns talking. Hey, you hear about Dr. Miles last night? He almost lost a kid, but apparently the janitor saved the day. Wait, seriously? The janitor? Yeah, the guy's some kind of legend now. Ethan paused outside the door, listening. For once, he didn't feel defensive. He smiled. Let them talk, he murmured to himself. They're not wrong. That evening, when Samuel walked past the nurse's station, Ethan was waiting. He handed him a cup of coffee, the good kind, from the cafe across the street. For the record, Ethan said with a grin, you were right. The hospital coffee is terrible. Samuel chuckled softly. Took you 20 years to figure that out? Ethan raised the cup. Guess I'm still learning. And as the two men stood side by side in the quiet hallway, doctor and janitor, the walls of hierarchy that had separated them for years began to crumble, replaced by something far stronger, respect. 3 nights later, the hospital was alive again. The rhythm of beeping monitors, rushing footsteps, and urgent voices echoing through the corridors. It was a stormy evening, thunder rumbling somewhere over the city, rain streaking the windows of St. Helena General like nervous handwriting. Dr. Ethan Miles had been on call for nearly 16 hours straight, his shoulders tense, his mind foggy. It had been a quiet evening, until the doors to the ER burst open. Severe chest pain, male, late 50s, unresponsive on arrival, shouted the paramedic as 2 nurses rushed a stretcher inside. Ethan snapped into focus instantly. Get him into trauma too. The team moved quickly. The patient's face was gray, his shirt soaked in rain. Electrodes were attached, oxygen was set, and monitors flickered to life. A weak, irregular rhythm. Possible myocardial infarction, Ethan said. Prep for defibrillation. We might need to intubate. He barked orders like he always did. But this time, there was something different in his tone. No arrogance, no detachment. Just focus. Empathy. As the staff scrambled, Samuel Turner was cleaning in the corridor nearby. When he saw the commotion, he set his mop aside and stepped toward the door, keeping a respectful distance. He didn't want to intrude, but years of working in that hospital had taught him to listen to the air. Something about the rhythm of that heart monitor made his stomach twist. Ethan was preparing to administer medication when Samuel cleared his throat softly. "Doctor?" Ethan glanced over his shoulder. "Sam, now's not—" "Forgive me," Samuel said quickly. "But that man, I think I've seen him before. He works maintenance. He's allergic to aspirin." Ethan froze. "What?" Samuel nodded. "He had a bad reaction a few years back. They had to use epinephrine. Check his file." Ethan turned to the nurse. "Get his chart, now!" Seconds later, the nurse returned, flipping through the digital records. "He's right. Severe aspirin allergy. Flagged 5 years ago." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Good catch, Sam." He turned to the nurse. "All right, no aspirin, no salicylates. Let's switch protocol. Heparin and nitro drip. Go!" The room came alive again, nurses moving in sync. Within minutes, the patient's color began to return. His pulse stabilized. The monitor's rhythm smoothed out. Ethan stepped back, exhaling. "We've got him." There was a collective sigh of relief. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the soft beep of the heart monitor. Strong, steady, alive. Ethan turned toward the doorway, where Samuel stood quietly, hands clasped behind his back, ready to slip away as if nothing had happened. "Sam," Ethan called. "Stay." The janitor paused. Ethan walked over, his voice low but firm. "You just saved that man's life." Samuel shook his head. "No, Doc. I just remembered his face." "You saved him." Ethan smiled faintly. "We both did. That's how hospitals are supposed to work." For a second, Samuel looked like he might protest, but then he nodded, eyes warm. "Guess that's true." Later that night, the storm passed. The city lights shimmered through the rain-washed windows, and the hospital settled into a rare moment of calm. Ethan sat in the staff lounge, exhausted but at peace, sipping cold coffee. Samuel entered quietly, pushing his cleaning cart. "Thought you went home hours ago," Ethan said. "Night shift never ends," Samuel replied with a grin. Ethan chuckled. "You know, the funny thing is, a week ago, I wouldn't have noticed you walking past. I'd have been buried in charts, convinced I was the only one who mattered." Samuel smiled softly. "Takes time to see what's right in front of you, Doc. Sometimes you've got to be humbled before your eyes open." Ethan nodded, eyes thoughtful. "You ever think about how much you know, Sam? The things you catch? The details we miss?" "I just pay attention," Samuel said. "You folks are busy saving lives. I just make sure the place you do it in stays clean, safe, working right. Different jobs, same purpose." Ethan leaned back. "No, Sam, not different. Equal." Samuel looked surprised for a moment, then smiled. "Equal? I like that." Before heading back to his station, Samuel paused at the doorway. "You know, Doc, when I started here, a nurse told me something I never forgot. A hospital doesn't run on medicine. It runs on people who care." Took me 20 years to realize how right she was. Ethan's gaze followed him as he disappeared down the hall, mop buckets squeaking softly. For the first time in his career, Ethan understood something deeper than anatomy, deeper than medicine. Hospitals healed more than patients. Sometimes they healed people. And sometimes the ones who cleaned the floors were the ones who taught the doctors how to save lives. By the end of the week, everyone at St. Helena General was talking about the same thing. Not a surgery, not a groundbreaking diagnosis, but the janitor. Word spread quietly at first. How Samuel Turner had caught a critical error. How he'd saved not one but 2 lives in a single week. What began as whispers among nurses soon reached the ears of the hospital administration. Dr. Ethan Miles didn't start the rumors, but he didn't stop them either. For once, he wanted people to know the truth, who had really been watching over them all along. On Monday morning, an email from the Chief of Staff announced an all-department assembly. The subject line read, "Recognizing Hidden Heroes, a Culture of Care." Most assumed it was just another PR stunt, another dry speech about teamwork and values. But when Ethan stepped onto the stage, holding a single sheet of paper and looking uncharacteristically humble, the room fell silent. "Good morning," he began. "Before I start, I need to admit something." He paused, scanning the crowd of white coats, scrubs, and administrative badges. "I've worked here for 12 years. I've performed hundreds of procedures, and for most of that time, I believed I understood what saving lives meant. But last week, I learned how wrong I was." He took a breath, his voice steady but quiet. "During a code in the ER, I was seconds away from losing a patient. The only reason that child survived is because someone who wasn't a doctor or a nurse or a technician, spoke up. He noticed what I missed." There were murmurs now. Heads turned. A few nurses exchanged knowing glances. Ethan continued. "That man was Samuel Turner, our night janitor. He's been here 20 years. He doesn't wear a white coat or hold a medical degree, but I can say without hesitation that he saved more lives last week than I did." The room went still. You could have heard a heartbeat echo across the hall. Ethan turned toward the side of the stage. "Samuel, would you join me up here, please?" From the back row, Samuel hesitated. He looked almost out of place amid the sea of uniforms, his blue scrubs worn, his hands rough from years of work. But as the crowd parted, he slowly made his way forward, every step met with growing applause. When he reached the stage, Ethan smiled. "You told me once that hospitals run on people who care. I didn't understand that until you showed me what it means." He gestured toward him. "Everyone. This is the man who reminded me and reminded all of us why we're here." The applause grew thunderous. Nurses stood. Even a few doctors, the same ones who used to pass Samuel without a glance, were clapping with genuine respect. Samuel looked overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say," he murmured into the microphone. "Say what you always say," Ethan said gently. Samuel smiled. "Then I'll say this. Every job here matters, from the surgeons to the ones who mop the floors. The patients don't see ranks, they see faces. And sometimes, the smallest act of care can make the biggest difference." The crowd erupted again, but this time, the cheers weren't just for Samuel. They were for everyone, for every unnoticed act that made healing possible. Later that afternoon, the hospital administration held an impromptu meeting. They approved a new internal program, the Turner Initiative, to honor and reward non-medical staff who went above and beyond in patient care. Samuel's name was the first one on the plaque. Afterward, as the lobby emptied, Ethan found him sitting quietly on a bench near the window, sipping coffee from a paper cup. "You handled that better than I could have," Ethan said with a chuckle. Samuel smiled. "I've been mopping these halls long enough to get used to the spotlight bouncing off me. Never thought it'd shine my way." "You earned it," Ethan said sincerely. "You didn't just save a boy. You saved me from becoming the kind of doctor who forgets what this job really means." Samuel looked at him, eyes soft. "Eyes. Then I'd say we both did some healing this week." Ethan laughed, leaning back on the bench. "You ever think about retiring? You've earned it, you know." Samuel shook his head. "Retiring? Nah. Someone's got to keep these halls shining. Besides," he looked out toward the ER doors, where stretchers rolled in and nurses hurried past, "I've still got a few lessons left to teach." That evening, when Ethan walked through the hospital, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. Nurses smiled at the janitorial staff. Orderlies thanked the cleaning crew. The cafeteria workers got standing applause from a table of interns. It was subtle but real, the kind of cultural shift that doesn't come from policies or memos. It came from respect. As Ethan passed Samuel's cart in the hall, he couldn't help but smile. The mop gleamed under the fluorescent lights, the same way Samuel's quiet dignity did. And for the first time, Ethan realized that the man everyone had overlooked had done far more than clean a hospital. He'd cleansed it of arrogance, indifference, and the blindness that kept people from seeing one another.